Hello, this is John Ward interviewing Ollie Drayan about his research, trying to bring research alive from the researcher's perspective. So, Ollie, would you tell us a little bit about the article that you wrote that the students in the research methods class are reading, and what interested you in doing that research?
Sure. The study was focusing on two science teachers, beginning science teachers, who were using inquiry in their classroom settings. And inquiry is a very different approach than most teachers are used to, and it's what, from a national level, is being presented as the model for science instruction. And so it's been part of the national science standards for about the last decade or so. And we've been trying to really influence how science is taught in our country. We're finding that people are still teaching pretty much the same way, and so we created this system when I was at Penn State, where we were going to teach them how to use inquiry in their classrooms. And what I was interested in is what were the experiences that they had teaching with inquiry. What were some of the feelings they had? What was the actual experience like for these new teachers to be in a classroom setting and working with students and trying to teach with inquiry. So the study, I followed them from before they were student teachers through their student teaching experience and then into their second year of teaching. And what I found through interviews and discussion boards and blog posts and also discussions with their mentor teacher and also with the rest of the research group was that there was a lot of anxiety that came through, that the students were fearful of not having control of the classroom. When the students would ask questions or when they would be put in inquiry situations, that these new teachers always kind of felt like they didn't always know the right answer, and they felt that undermined their identity in the classroom as a knowledgeable teacher, which is something that new teachers struggle with, is trying to be perceived as being the expert in the room, despite being like 21 or 22 years old. And these were two female teachers with which I think struggle with that a little bit more than some, because they're coming in 22 years old, brand new teachers, and they're presenting a different approach where there's a lot of questioning, a lot of experimentation, where students are really taught the scientific process by engaging in it, and the student teachers, these beginning teachers, felt like they needed to know all the answers, and when they didn't, it scared them. And so it really affected their instructional practices. It really, because they were successful science students, so they were successful in a model in which lecture was the model. So this was so foreign to them that they feared giving up control of the class because they felt that worked against their perception or the way they presented themselves as the expert science person in the room.
Ollie, you used a research methodology known as phenomenology, which is very different than I think most people who haven't read this kind of research would expect. Talk a little bit about the idea behind phenomenology and the data collection, which you already described, but a little bit more about how you do the data analysis with the interviews and the other kind of text-based information that you get from.
Well, it's a qualitative process, so that you're not working with numbers or survey data. You're working with words, with a variety of things in which emotions and thoughts and opinions and beliefs are expressed. And the way I went through this is I took all of the tapes, whether they were videotapes or digital audio tapes or what, and I transcribed all of them, and through the transcription process would start looking for common themes that kept emerging. And I was looking for themes that presented themselves in a variety of different places. So maybe in a blog post they mentioned something, but then they mentioned something very similar in another place. When those themes, those common themes come up, that's telling you that that's a common experience for them. And so it's much different than a quantitative approach, because the idea is there's this positivist point of view in which that people believe that the answer's out there if you just search, and I think there's a variety of answers. And I think that while this study is phenomenological, does it communicate to new teachers? Absolutely. Does it communicate to all new teachers? Absolutely not. And I don't know if some, survey data would say the same thing. Would a survey or some, some study of 1,000 new teachers, and we would be able to have some sort of, X number of people experience this, would that communicate more? I don't know. We're not testing widgets. Teaching is a human process, and I think that in order to better understand teaching and education, you have to take a more humanistic point of view in how you research it and how you study it. And I don't think taking it, quantifying it down to numbers and statistics is necessarily the way. I can say that, yeah, my study is 2 people. It has 2 people in it, but I know a lot about these 2 people. And where, you can know a little bit about 100 people and then say, this may generalize to a larger population. My in phenomenological research, the generalizations come from people who read it saying, you know what, yes, I know that experience because I've lived it as well. Or saying, I know what it's like to live that experience. Because now through the descriptions, through the narratives that were presented, I have a better understanding of what these 2 people experienced.
You're really answering the question I was going to ask next. I was going to ask you to answer somebody who would say, well, so what, you only did 2 people.
Right.
But let me ask the same question a little bit differently.
Okay.
Let's say somebody says this is not credible at all because it's only 2 people. And they say the way you should have done your research is to conduct an experiment where you train, say, 30 students in inquiry methods and 30 students in non-inquiry methods, and then you follow them into their first year of teaching it and see who has a successful year through some kind of objective observation instrument.
Okay.
What would you say to somebody who said that would have been a better way to do this research?
So I think the first thing I would do is I would try to point out that even though that a model like that sounds more, experimental, the reality is it's not any less experimental than what I'm doing. I mean, the standpoint is that what they're doing.
You mean it's not any more objective than what you're doing? Is that what you're trying to
Well,
say?
they have very little control over the things that they say they want to control.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
It appears to be
a
a controlled experiment, but it's not.
It is absolutely not.
Why not?
Because, you randomize these teachers and you put them in 2 different classrooms. And are you going to randomly put the students in those classrooms? Or are you going to randomly, how do you control all of the different settings that they're in, all of the different backgrounds of the students? How do you, the thing is it's sort of a sticky widget when you really look at it. There's all of these, contexts that affect the teaching profession, and how do you get around all that? And presenting it as any more experimental, I think, is doing it a disservice. So I think that what we need to do is just, let's cut away the pretenses of it being a controlled experiment and say, look, is there stuff we can learn from that? Absolutely, we can learn some stuff from a study like that. But I think that there's a lot to be learned from a study like I've done, where you instead of looking at a little bit about a lot of people and then generalizing in terms of numbers and statistics and trying to present it that way, tell a really good story of people who've actually lived those experiences so that other people can learn from those experiences.
All right. Now you did this research as part of your dissertation
Yes.
process, but now it's you're in the process of getting published.
I'm trying to, yes.
And but how is this research affecting either the way you work or the way you work with pre-service teachers or ongoing research you might want to do?
Well, I think one of the things it's done with me is it informed a lot of what I do is teacher education. So currently we're working with some science teachers, some beginning science teachers. And so what it's done is it's informed my role as a mentor with them, knowing firsthand that they're going to struggle with inquiry as a model, not necessarily from understanding what it is, but enacting it. I mean, they'll be able to say, well, inquiry is this, but then being able to design a classroom setting that would foster an inquiry classroom, an inquiry-oriented classroom, I think is a challenge. Understanding that that the students are going to have some fear, some anxiety for teaching in a model that's so different from what they themselves experience as students.
And I think that's something you probably would know already, that they would have anxiety, but now you know more of the nuances of how the anxieties come about.
Oh, absolutely. And then, I mean, fear is no doubt a common experience for lots of new teachers. But traditionally, the research has shown that the fear was around classroom management experiences.
Yeah.
And it's not, in the two that I came up, the two I studied, classroom management was not a concern at all. It was more of a concern of how they were being perceived by the students in class, because they were using this model that, you know, exposed them or exposed their knowledge base. And that's much different than, I'm a new teacher, I don't know how to control class. So I think those fears, well, granted, they're both anxiety-driven emotions. I think that they originate from very different places.
Okay. Thank you very much.